Hi, beautiful. Welcome to episode 4, Discipline, the gift you give yourself. So today's episode is about discipline. And this is going to be a 2-part episode where I will follow up with the second half tomorrow because it's just too big of a topic to cover in one episode. I'm going to talk about it in a way that's maybe different than you're used to. The root word of discipline is disciple, which comes from the Latin word discipulus. And most people are used to thinking about disciple in a more religious context, but in reality, the word simply means student, one who studies. And it means that we have the capacity to learn from our teachers. That's what a student is. And I've had some really excellent teachers in my life, and I'm also committed to letting life be my teacher. And if something happens, I don't spend too much time sitting around cursing it or complaining about it. I really don't. I've developed the habit of just getting curious about it. I ask myself, what can I learn or glean from this? What was my part in this? Am I blame shifting responsibility onto someone else? Or am I doing the opposite, where I'm taking all the responsibility for something that in reality I had no responsibility for or control over, and I need to just let it go? And if I get really upset about something, I'll also go a little deeper. I'll sit with the feeling like we talked about yesterday, but I'll also ask myself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is there something deeper? And I do this to make sure that when I sit with my feelings, and we do this because there's no way to intellectualize away how you're feeling. So no matter how much you might intellectually know that something is just silly or unimportant, why am I upset by this? Well, we still have to accept that this is how I feel in this moment, and we bring compassion to that. And that's how we purge it instead of just repressing it. And here's the reason for why I asked myself, what's the deeper story? It's because I found that when I'm upset, it's almost never for the reason I originally thought. It ends up that I'm upset about something much deeper than the current situation triggered. Michael Brown wrote an amazing book called The Presence Process, which I'll reference in the video description in case you want to check it out. The Presence Process. And in this book, he talks about how anytime that you are upset, realize that it's also a set up. You know, he cuts the word in half and reverses it. It's your past that's making connections, often illogical, about feelings that you had as a child. Like, let's say in the present, your boyfriend says something that reminds you of something your father said when you were small, and your father left you, and now all of a sudden war is breaking out, and you're spinning out of control really fast, just getting really emotional. You don't even know why. And you just jump to these assumptions. He doesn't love me anymore. And you know, you go to these unhealed traumas and you get really reactive and start having thoughts like, I'm just going to leave him before he has a chance to leave me. And meanwhile, this is just a hypothetical. We all have different triggers. But in this scenario, the boyfriend's sitting there going like, I don't even know why she's blowing up at me. You know, the poor guy. And often we ourselves don't even know why we're getting so upset. And we don't understand there's this whole connected history. And so we have these little emotional setups. And you're not a weirdo for this because we all do it. But our happiness does to some degree depend on us being able to manage them by sitting with these feelings instead of just, you know, vomiting them out all over everyone else. And we should always be able to voice our genuine thoughts and feelings and requests to the people around us. But it won't be received well. It won't be effective communication unless we've processed the immediate reaction first, most of the time. Our goal is to be able to be responsive to our own needs and for other people that we might be responsible for, instead of being reactive to them. Instead of being reactive about the feeling, we're choosing to be responsible. So in terms of being upset, it is going to require some discipline to be able to do this consistently. And we have to really want it. And I'm going to share a personal example. I had this friend who wasn't really that nice to me most of the time, and she had trauma in her background. And so I would intellectualize my feelings. And I'd be like, well, she had this happen, so that's why she does this. So it's okay, and you shouldn't be mad at her. I'd shame myself, basically. But one time she did something that was just very cutting, and I felt so hurt. And I was angry at her. And I couldn't just justify it away like I was used to doing. And I knew I hadn't gotten to the root of this feeling because it lingered, and I was just feeling upset the whole day. So I finally got really still, and I allowed myself to just feel it. And I asked myself, okay, what's the deeper meaning or story behind why I'm feeling so hurt right now? And I sat with that, and I sat with that question, and what rose up inside of me was that I was afraid that I deserved to be treated that way, the way she treated me, because I was inherently unlovable. So it wasn't even about her. It was about me thinking I was unlovable. And some little part of me genuinely believed that. So I sat with that part, and I assured it that I am lovable and wonderful. No one has to love me. No one's obligated to love me, but some people do, because you're just so lovable. And more importantly, and this is what I really needed to assure myself, I love you. I love you. And when I got to that point, the pain just washed away. I was just bawling, and I had gotten to the core of it, and all this suffering just melted. And that helped me to just immediately forgive my friend. And not because she deserved to be forgiven or anything like that, but because I deserved to have peace. And it was just in a non-judgmental, non-critical way, I realized that what we had wasn't a friendship. It was more like some kind of trauma bond that we had labeled a friendship. And I needed to let it go, which was pretty simple, because for me, that just meant I needed to stop being two sides of the friendship, because that was my pattern to overgive. And as soon as I stopped initiating everything, there really wasn't a friendship. There wasn't a relationship. And I couldn't blame her for that, because I was just as much a part of our unhealthy dynamic as she was. I would overgive, and I would put in most of the effort, because at my core, I thought I wasn't lovable, so I needed to do that. And at the time, that's the only way I knew how to show love. And then she would be dismissive or criticize me over unrelated minutia, because with her past history, she was just very uncomfortable receiving. And some of that goes into attachment styles. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But in a nutshell, she was acting from a wounded place, and I was acting from a wounded place. And there wasn't really a bad guy. It was just a dynamic that really wasn't working for either of us. And our outer dance was unconsciously reflecting our unique inner wounding. So how discipline comes into this is that in order to transcend old patterns, we have to become curious students of our own behavior and of our own reactions to things. And of course, not everything that we feel needs to be analyzed, dissected, and labeled. A lot of times our feelings just need to be felt. We just need to sit with them and let the light of our presence heal those feelings. It's just like being present for your inner child and not shaming it or judging it. It's just, I'm here. I'm not abandoning you to hurt alone. I'm not repressing it. I'm not going to pretend I don't feel the way I feel. When we do that, it's kind of like shoving our inner child in the closet and just telling it to shut up. Like, I don't have time for you. Just shut up. But it's still down there somewhere, that feeling, that inner child, and it's weeping in the closet. And even though the door's closed and it's muffled, we still hear it, little bits and pieces. It still comes up every now and then, and it's affecting our happiness and our mood. So we sit with these feelings, before they start wreaking havoc in our life, and we get curious. And if we find ourselves in a pattern, then this is where being a curious student is such a beautiful gift to yourself. And it's how we start to be aware of and change patterns to be healthier, so we can be happier. And my pattern was overgiving to people who didn't appreciate me. They didn't appreciate how generous I was, and they didn't treat me very well. And what I did was, instead of cultivating friendships with people who didn't like me, I started cultivating friendships with people who actually did like me. I didn't have to do anything to win their love. They just like me because they like me. And for me, that was like a new concept, because on a subconscious level, I felt like I didn't deserve real love. And that might have stemmed from, as a child, I was emotionally neglected due to a variety of circumstances that weren't really anyone's fault. It was just how it was. And I had this internalized belief that I wasn't worth being around just to be around. And on some level, I felt like I've got to earn people's love, or I've got to pay them in some form or another to be my friend, for them to like me. How sad is that? I'm also a genuinely kind person. I'm genuinely generous. That is part of my nature. So I didn't have to demonize or lose that part of myself, but I needed to learn how to reserve that aspect of me for people who appreciated it, for people who naturally wanted to reciprocate to some degree instead of being rejecting towards me, because that was just making my wounds deeper. So for today, let's get really curious instead of reactive. And I know that's easier said than done. Trust me, I know. I've struggled with this. And it may take years to get really good at this, but it's so worth it. So I'm committing to being both very present to my emotions today in a non-reactive but present way. And I'm also choosing to be a student of the self and to be more aware of the patterns that make me unhappy or happy. And anytime you hear yourself say, why does this always happen to me? Why does this keep happening? I bet if you look deeper at that question with less judgment and more curiosity, you will be able to start identifying an unhealthy or dysfunctional pattern. So that's our challenge for today. And we'll talk more about the concept of discipline and how to harness it towards greater happiness. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. In the meantime, we'll do this together. I invite you to join me in being less reactive and more present and more curious. Have a beautiful day. I love you. Mwah.